Hey there everyone, I'm just going to go through a quick example showing a couple of ways that we can go through and do our loops. So first of all, I'm going to go through and show you how to do a for loop, and then I'm going to go through and show you how to do a while loop. So before we do that, I'm just going to go ahead and add a few things to my view controller. I'll speed this up just because this is a process that at this point we should have done a lot of times. Again, to iterate this as well, I'm going to change my window here. Again, clicking on this window, having my pane over here, and might just call this loop example. Perfect. So I'm just going to go ahead and create my view now. So at this point here, I also want to go through quickly how we can go ahead and make our scrollable text view. So in our library, I'm going to search scrollable text view here, and I'm just going to drag this in like so. When we go ahead and drag this in, what I'm going to do from here is once I've got this highlighted, I'm going to click on this, this down the bottom here. I'm going to click on this button here. So this is going to basically let me do this. That I'll see all of the things I've inserted into my view controller here. Once I'm on my scroll view, I need to go under my clip view, and then I need to have my highlighted text view here. So with my text view highlighted now, I'm going to make another window. I'm going to have my view controller here. And then for this point here, what I'm going to do is when I drag this in, I need to make sure that, since I find it, there we are. I need to make sure when I drag this in, that I specifically drag in my text view. If I do not have my text view highlighted, that means I won't be able to insert anything else that is required for this. So I'm just going to give you some comments. All right, inputs and outputs here. I'm going to drag in this text view here. And then I will know it's a text view because it will come up here and say NS text view like so. So really make sure that this comes up and says NS text view. If it does not, then you've selected the wrong one and you need to make sure that you do click on this one here. I'm going to go ahead and I might just call this a scrollable text view, STV for short. As long as you have 3 letters at the front that make sense to you, then that should be fine. I've just used STV for scrollable text view. And then I might just call this, I'll call this multiples. Make sure that is given as my output. This is going to be what the program is going to output any transformations to. And then my input is going to be this text box here. So I'm going to just make this txt number. Perfect. I'll drag in my action. And then I'll change this to btn multiply number multiply. Now, at this point here, what I want my program to do is I want this to take an input number and show multiplications to 12. I'm going to give myself a little bit of room to see here, so I'm going to go ahead and close that. That way I can see a little bit more here. So, big thing we want to do, like we always do, is I'm going to start off by simply having my number here. So I might just say number as a int. I'm going to make that equal to txt number dot string value. As it is an int, I need to make sure that I wrap it like so, to say that this is going to be an integer coming in. It's going to yell at me, make sure there's an exclamation mark there. So, the first one I'm going to do is I'm going to have a for loop. So I'm going to go for loop to count up to 12 times. Now, for loop has a few major parts with it. We're going to start by saying for, and then we're going to have a counter. So I'm just going to call this one counter, You can call this anything you want to. This is just the variable that we're going to use. It's going to keep track of when things go over and over and over again. So I'm going to say for counter in 1.12. This is basically just saying that we're going to have a counter, and this counter is going to keep track of the numbers between 1 to 12. When we have this counter like so, sorry, I can simply do something like this. It's going to run all the way from 1 to 12 and keep track of this counter. So I'm able to do this. So I can simply say, I might have a var, I'm going to call this multiple. Actually, I might even call it multiplied number. And I can make that simply equal to my counter times my number. Times my number. So this way, it's going to take the value of the counter for every single time it loops through. So it would start with 1, and then would go to 2, then to 3, then the 4, and be able to multiply by this number here. I now want to put this back to my standard view. So to my scrolled view. So I'm going to go to stv multiples dot string. This is a string, not a string value. So just be careful with a scrollable text view for this. One thing we need to do, however, is to make sure it appends on the end and keeps adding something new. We need to use this plus equals like so. So when we have this plus equals, it's basically the same as saying that we want to have stv multiples dot string equal to itself plus something else. So this plus equals is just basically just saying, okay, take whatever was given here before and then add on whatever else from here. So at this point here, we're going to have our stv multiples.string. I want to now make it so it's going to say there's going to be my number. Actually, I'll say my counter first, sorry. Put a little X. Then from here on, I'm going to have my number. And then I'm going to make that equal to my multiplied number. So this one will have the counter that we're up to. We'll say times the number that we've inserted. And that's going to equal to the multiplied number I've made here. One more thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little \n here. So \n is basically just going to say every single time we do this, make a new line. So make a new line break, which means that we're going to have a little space at the end. So reading through this, we are going to go from 1 to 12 with counter keeping track of what number we're up to. We're simply going to find out what our multiplied number is going to be. And then we're just simply going to say the counter times the number inserted is going to equal to the multiplied number. So I'm going to go ahead and run that one now, and then we can see how this runs and works exactly. I can go ahead and insert the number 5, go add number, and we can see here, indeed, 1 times 5 is 5, 2 times 5 is 10, etc., until it gets to the number 12, and then it finishes. So, again, looking back at our code, we can see that counter times number is multiplied number. We can see that counter as 1 here times the number 5 is 5. Counter then goes to 2 to be times 5 equals 10. Counter then goes to 3 times 5 equals 15. Then the 4, etc. until we get up to 12, in which it finishes the loop. Now, there's one more thing we can also do here. So if we have a for loop exactly dictating how many times we're going to run, we can do one more and we can do a while loop. So if we're going to a while loop instead, we can give it a condition that is going to keep doing it until it doesn't do it anymore, until that condition is met. So I'm going to say while, And then I've got to work out what that is going to be. So I'm going to make a variable here. I'm going to call this var counter. Actually, I might just say var count, doesn't get too confused. And make that equal to 0. I'm going to say while count does not equal 12. Then at this point here, I want to do the same thing. I'm simply just going to put the number and multiply it here. And then there's going to be an extra step I'm going to do. So I'm just going to go ahead and take this like so. Only thing is though, at this point, change these here as well. At this point, however, one thing I am going to do is I need to make sure that this count keeps adding up to a new number. If otherwise, we're going to be stuck in an infinite loop, and it's just going to keep doing it over and over and over again because count is never going to hit 12. So I need to say that count plus equals 1. In the same way that we've done it here and that we've added it to itself, we're saying that count is just going to equal to itself plus 1. Again, the exact same way that you could write count equals count plus 1. These two are exactly the same. So I'm going to comment this one out and show you how this one works now. So I'm going to rerun this now, and then we'll see how this while loop works. So now we've got the while loop here. I'm going to put 5 in again and then add my number, and then we can see how it goes through here. There is, however, going to be a few things, as you can see here, that you have to be really careful of with things like while loops. And that you have to be careful with the number it starts with and where it's going to end. If we wanted to finish at 12, we should adjust this a little bit. So that way we need to say while the count is not 13. And it'll be really advisable maybe to start this at where you want to start it at. So we might start this at 1 instead. So this is something you have to really be careful of when you think about how you're going through this. These are known as off by 1 errors for reasons you could probably be able to guess why. So if we now run this, we will then see exactly what happens here. Oops. Enter 5 now, and we can see indeed that this is working through as need be.